Okay, just wanted to talk briefly about some Chartist projections for Bitcoin and based on previous patterns. So it's always good to take a step back and to kind of plan and prepare for what to do next. And I bring this chart up because this was a Chartist I came across that mapped out different patterns and behaviors of Bitcoin, and there is a lot of repeatable stuff in the past. The interesting thing about it is it lines up with Cliff High's projection, who's been accurate, almost within a couple $100 of Bitcoin's price movement. As long as I've followed him from about $400, he's been right previously, though. I mean, beyond that, he has a great outstanding track record. But the ups and downs of Bitcoin for last year have been extremely accurate, and I've traded against it, made lots of money on it. And this kind of goes through the chart, so just kind of outlines that, and it aligns with Cliff High's projection. And his projection by the end of this year is 100,000 Bitcoin. $100,000 Bitcoin was Cliff High's projection. In his data sets, there were quote unquote $100,000 parties for Bitcoin. So this was the kind of end of the year kind of rally and party after that. So how do we get there, and how do we plan for that, and what the strategy is once we hit that? So let's talk about that a little bit. So this chart just maps out the patterns of its growth. This is pretty repeatable when you look at different markets, and this is as close to a free market as you get. When groups of humans get together, there's definite patterns in their behavior, and there's a lot of predictable elements to it. And what you're seeing is exponential growth curve of a normal market cycle. So these were several years ago, and then we saw a nice big spike, and different news events drew it, dictated its growth. But this was the end of last year, and this is where we're at today. And what you're seeing is super similar patterns between the peaks and valleys, the highs and lows, and even in the movements. And as far as its growth, and basically we seem to hit a 6.6 or $6,000 floor. And this is what activated this Chartist. So once he noticed the $6,000 floor, he compared it against previous lows and previous floors and previous behaviors. So let's look at how this year kind of aligns up based on this pattern in the market. So what he's projecting at, if we're at a low for the year, he's projecting a rise to about 14,880 or 13,888. So this is, and this is, probably within a couple months, his projection. Now, Cliff High's was through the end of February. We were going to get 13,888. So this is an alignment. Now there is kind of a divergence because Cliff says that once it reaches 1388, it's going to go much higher. Maybe he didn't hit his data is not based on, these are based on, they're approaching this problem from different angles. So we may see a pretty big dip a couple months, according to previous patterns, after this rise. And he says 13,888. Was Cliff High's projection. This Chartist points it at about $14,000, 14,888. Okay, so the thing to be prepared about is, it dropped a lot, and we're going to recover some. Look for a rounding off once we hit that $13,000 mark, whenever we hit it, and just kind of check against which is lining more, whether this Chartist projections lines up more or Cliff High's projections, but they are pretty close. Okay, so the other point of similarity is, and they both conclude it's $100,000 at the end of the year. And this actually matches the percentage run-up when you look at last year towards the end of the year. And this is just before the end of the year, but we saw a rise from about $5,000 to $20,000. So when you look at percentage wise, that puts us at $100,000 Bitcoin, and his projection was $110,000 Bitcoin as a high. So one thing, and let's look at this is another similar point. So this is a place to be at about $40,000, and Cliff High's projections is about $40,000 to $60,000 and a $20,000 retracement. So there is a potential for a swing trade if you see something rounding off or see a top rounding off $40,000 to $60,000. $64,000 was Cliff High's projection by summer. So there is a divergence a little bit, and he's talking about a $20,000 retracement. That's not necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing to think about as far as planning goes is once we hit that 100,000 mark, this is where they're in alignment. And so I tend to pay attention to that. If I get two different competing schools that have overlap, I'm paying attention to it. So say we see $100,000 Bitcoin, you're looking for a retracement to about $40,000, and this is what he sees. So his even number says between $60,000 to $40,000, and you can see the dip and 60 to 40,000 and the new baseline. And we're looking to move through that for maybe a year before we see another run up. So one thing I would consider is taking profit either at the $40,000 to $60,000 mark or at the $100,000 mark. Take a percentage off. Maybe that's 10% as you're laddering out. Even up to 80%. So it's kind of up to you what your strategy is. I always recommend, just keeping a small portion necessarily, just to time it. But when these two different schools of thought come together, from a linguistics perspective and from a statistical chart perspective, when you see alignment there, that's hard to ignore. And with Cliff High's accuracy, I'll take it seriously, even though the kind of methodology is questionable. So this is one thing to mark for. I don't know how much you want to actually trade. The $100,000 mark at the end of the year, make sure to look to take profits, whether that be in cash or to save it in silver or whatever you're doing, whatever the tether equivalent is at that point. The other thing to think about is the kind of potential for a gulf and a longer kind of consolidation point before the next run. So Cliff High's data projects it to be shorter. So, he's seeing gradual growth throughout the year. This guy predicts a deeper goalie. And that's just, you can play that as it is. The takeaway I would say is just be prepared to hold at these levels for a longer period of time. I see the $6,600 mark to be a pretty solid number, a solid floor, compared to the previous kind of floor that was set before the big run up of last year. And that seems to line up pretty nicely. I mean, when you see this floor versus this floor here, this floor versus this floor here. So something to think about. We may be in for some good accumulation period. Most people are going to be priced out at this point. I mean, we're still going to be able to grow, but you want to accumulate in this gulf, even if you've lost money. So I know this seems massive, but just remember that we moved up massively. Look at the history of growth on this thing. So this is outstanding. And it's only a tiny market cap. I mean, it's $400 billion, and there's $1,000 trillion in the world. So, if your money went down, if you invested at $20,000, and we have lower prices, it's going to move up. I mean, there's not a lot of assets that money can move into at this point that isn't completely crashing at the moment, isn't highly overvalued. So this is going to look appealing. Yeah, I just want to give you guys an idea of where we're at, what to expect. Expect a accumulation period for a while. I know it's hard to buy if you feel like you've lost money. But we always have this growth curve to look for. This is the exact same shape of an S curve, and we're just at the beginning. So this is an outstanding kind of accumulation period. A great way to grow your growth or grow your wealth over a long period of time. Meaning 3 to 10 years. But outstanding stuff and outstanding outlook for this asset class. All right, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.